Erica, while I'm finding it, would you attempt to narrow the scope of the conversation we're about to have on it in any way you like?
I kind of want to suggest that we think about line breaks.
Very good.
And the actual form of the poem, because in contrast to some of the other poems that have come up and what folks have mentioned, this poem's so skinny.
It's skinny.
And it does so much, so I wonder if that might be an unusual place for us to start.
Okay, great. So Kate, Davey, Lainey, J.S., I'm about to play Eileen Myles performing Writing, this is a performance here at the Writers' House, I think.
Writing. I can connect any two things. That's God. Teeny piece of Band-Aid, little folded piece of Band-Aid. I ran to the bathroom to see my face. Sometimes I don't want to see my face in the mirror. Sometimes I can't bear my thoughts. Sometimes I can't do anything. But that's okay. Band-Aid, book, God. That's right.
Okay, so Kate first. Any thoughts on this? Erica's asking us about lines.
Yeah. What I observe is that the attenuated form manifests the process of drawing things together as they happen. So it has this kind of long stretched out quality that evinces the poet's moving through space and time and pulling in what is around them into the poem.
Oh, love that. Cannot wait to hear what Davey has to say in response to that.
That makes me think of the fact that the poem starts with two things, but the list that we get at the end of the poem is actually a list of three things. It's the list Band-Aid, book, God, which when I taught this poem a number of years ago, I had students wondering about whether book is like the hinge between Band-Aid and God, but also something that and actually Lily Applebaum did a collaborative close reading with my students back in 2018 of this poem. We filmed one, I think it's somewhere on the ModPo site. And something that we were wondering about in that conversation that I think the line breaks really bring out is whether it is the speaker of the poem who can connect any two things or the reader of the poem. That the reader of the poem is like, well, what do I do with Band-Aid and God? The way that they've been connected is really just that they've been lined up, that each of those words, Band-Aid, book, God, contains a line. And the reader of the poem is maybe the person doing the connective work saying, what's the relationship between Band-Aid and God? Why are these things in this poem? That the fact of putting them in the poem is an invitation to the reader as much as it is connective work being done by the poet themselves.
So, Davey, the reader could be taking over the first person or part of the first person. Wow,
they're certainly invited to.
That's very cool. Don't think we've ever read the poem quite that way, but it seems to make tons of sense. Can you take that just further for a couple of more seconds of smart talk, which is to say, what are the consequences of any poem having its reader be the first person?
Well, I mean, the theme that like when both Erica and I were talking about Eileen Myles' poems in that introductory moment of drawing poems out of the week 7 syllabus, the theme is about pedagogy, and I'm still thinking about Erica's, characteristically brilliant language for thinking about why you teach poems in a writing classroom, to be able to have students think that they can do stuff with words other than conform to teachers and employers' expectations of how to use them, that they have some creative agency with language. And I think that this is a poem, and Mount St. Helens also, that the Myles poems in the syllabus variously do this, that they make reading an agential process. They think of reading not as, and this is like what we were talking about a minute ago, not as a process solely of perception, but as a process of participation, something that really ModPo is founded on and thinking about, and that's a surprise to the reader. Not only that a reader comes to the poem saying, I'm going to be an agent, I'm going to co-constitute with this poem, but that a reader reads the poem and is shocked to feel invited, learns something about themselves as an agent of dealing with language in the process of reading the poem, and that's available to a reader who wants that from a poem and a reader who is shocked to find out that a poem can offer them that all the same.
Wow. That was so great. And I guess one of the things that we're going to turn to JS next, one of the things that that makes me think of as an educator myself is that my dreams, my emotional hopes every time I walk into a classroom are such that the people in the room will do what it takes to connect things that are a challenge to connect, so that I'm not doing the connecting. I'm inviting them to say, this is a challenge. This is not so much of what happens in a classroom is easy. It's all been pre-digestible-ishness, just connected in advance. And all the conversations of connecting were going on behind the scenes by all the smart people and the people with PhDs. And then you walk into a class and you say, here's how it connects. And I think one of the things that poetry teaches us as teachers is to make proximate to the classroom the parts and do the connecting together. You say, a co-creation of meaning. Thank you, Davy. JS, thoughts on lines in this poem or anything else?
Yeah, I really appreciate Davy's reading about agency and it being shared by both the narrator of the poem as well as the reader, because I think that where I was first thinking about was the little moments of futility in this poem, where although it opens on, I can connect any two things, and that's right, that's God. But I'm really struck by the image of little folded piece of Band-Aid, and the Band-Aid that's not connecting anything, but just sort of rendered inert, folded in on itself, taped to itself, and not, healing or connecting anything. And that like sprawling downwards into sometimes I don't want to see my face in the mirror, sometimes I can't bear my thoughts, and these things that a Band-Aid can't hold together, that are difficult to connect. But yeah, I guess while I was lingering on these moments of things that don't congeal, thinking about, again, what you were saying, Al, as well as Davy, about how the reading process and the collaborative reading process is maybe more powerful a connecting agent than a Band-Aid.
Yes. Well said, JS. Thank you. And Lainey. And then we're going to go to someone on the phone and find out what our next topic is.
I'm thinking about Erica's question about line breaks and why the poem is so thin on the page. And one thing that occurs to me is that it's so thin and it's so small and it can go anywhere. I'm thinking about the poet as a mover and the poem as the place that can go anywhere. And despite the difficulties encountered, that there's this toolkit. If the I is the poet and the poet is offering up the lines about the Band-Aid, my favorite part, Band-Aid, book, God, here's your toolkit. You can do anything. You can go anywhere. So it's offering that to us.
Yeah. The word empowering, which is often a cliche, is what comes to mind. Poem says, here are some pieces. You can do anything with this.
Deft
but let's see if
maneuvering.
Yes, deft maneuvering.